Hi, everybody, and welcome to another talk with Chris and Joanna. You may or may not notice my voice isn't 100%. We've been a little bit under the weather. Um, Here in Arizona, this time of year, allergies can be pretty darn rough. And I think from what I can tell from people around, since I'm not from here, is that allergies are pretty darn bad. And unfortunately, sometimes uh, there could be something a little bit more communicable start to be passed around that looks just like allergies until you realize it's a little bit something more. So we'll talk about this here within our conversation anyway. But both Chris and I have kind of been hit with a little bit of something. And I think for myself and Chris, it will just be a few more days and we'll be back to normal. So there's been a little bit of lag on our activity on this end because I will say that this has drained both of us pretty much. But again, all is well and we're going to be just fine. So we're going to do this talk today, and I think what will be interesting is to kind of fill you in on some things that have been happening to us over the past few weeks, as well as some ponderings that we have been having about certain current events. And not that we again have come to a conclusion, but we thought it would be nice again, with at least with this group. It's nice to be able to share the ponderings because sometimes again it gives you an opportunity to ponder on it as well. And who knows the conclusions that would potentially come up about a certain subject. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go back to something that happened to me. We'll start this conversation off a couple weeks ago. It did happen while I was at my work. There was a particular gentleman that was visiting a significant person in his life who was there at my work, who was there for illness, and uh, he would spend some time there, and then while the family member was resting, would come out and would potentially just have regular conversations with us. He was an interesting gentleman even from the day one that he came in because he was a wee bit frustrated with the fact that we had this mask mandate still in effect at my work, where if you're in a common area with people, the request is you wear your mask. And when you're in the room with your significant other, everyone's fine. Of course, masks can come off. This has been a standing protocol that's been in existence for well over a year now. It has not eased up at all. And people, again, have to still be screened. The relevance of a vaccine status is not taken into account. Again, these protocols have been in existence for over a year now. So he was showing a wee bit of his frustration over it. And that was just kind of my first just encounter. The One of the other encounters I had with him later on, it was very interesting because again, he was talking, and it was just myself, one other person, and him. No one else around to hear any conversation at all. And, he was talking about his, personal frustration with some of these things. And, I, kind of said, and a lot of us, are personally frustrated with this. Well, then the conversation moved on. And it was a very interesting thing because it made me feel that this gentleman had more like mindedness to my viewpoints. Um, and so there became a relaxation amongst um, everyone just sitting there talking because, again, There was no judgment. There was no, you're right, I'm wrong. It was just more of an interest of the conversation and being able to say what you wanted to say. So, in this gentleman's conversation, I thought it was very interesting because he very quickly started to open up to talk about things that had the person who was with me jaw drop, because it was really more in line with some of the things that we talked about. Now, he didn't know me from Adam that I know of. He didn't know me other than the function of the role that I was in. But he said some interesting things. So I thought, well, this is really interesting. Let's see how far this conversation goes, what he's comfortable saying, what he's not comfortable saying. And I'm going to be quite honest with you guys. I'm always open to the fact that somebody could be probing me to see where I am, to see what I know, to see. So I hate to say it, my mind is always there. So, but this didn't feel threatening, let's say threatening at all. There was nothing going on. And I'm always curious about what people are saying, and I'm not ashamed of what I say. So we just figure let the conversation flow. So it started again, a little bit again political, people commenting on the concern about our current president's health. I'll just leave it at that. And some, things that appear to be so obvious to some people and so non-obvious to others. That interestingly enough, somehow started morphing its way into a conversation that acknowledged that the political structure that we currently have is more fulfilled with puppets, and they are giving their marching instructions by those behind, and giving their marching instructions by those behind on people's names you don't even know. So what was interesting to me is his eagerness to acknowledge and have this conversation about the people behind the people whose names are not known. I thought that was very, interesting. He was very free and open about this. Then the conversation morphed into, and let's say in a sense, technologies and things that are happening that most people are not aware of. And this could be inclusive of some of those political puppets who are not aware of things that are going on behind the scenes that they've not been informed of. So it was a very interesting conversation. He wanted to give knowledge, his understanding, things about nanites always floating around, and nanites have been dropped on us by chemtrails. We're all literally have nanites all in us. And it's a matter of, and he felt very strongly that there was technology there that could literally turn on the nanites in one person, and the person standing next to them would be just perfectly fine. He felt that the technology was that in control. So it was a very, very, again, interesting conversation. He then divulged some information that he himself was an engineer, or a retired engineer, I believe. And he mentioned the name of the company that he had worked for. I found it very interesting, and I'm not going to name the company, but I thought it was very interesting because it is a named company that many people who talk about the secret space program and some of these black ops, they're one of the companies mentioned. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was very interesting. And again, part of me felt a little more that he was trying to feel me out, as well as, divulge information that he thought was okay to speak out loud. So I did divulge at that point about, well, actually what I did mention, well, I know we've got now the secret space, not the secret space force, the the Space Force that's just been developed. I said, but I think my understanding is that it's really, we're already out there, this, that, and the other, and it's been developed for quite some time. It's just now the dialogue of starting to bring some of this into the public's awareness. And he volunteered with great information that I thought was like, wow. He acknowledged that was true. He mentioned how a lot of the UFOs that we're seeing are our own advanced technologies. He mentioned that, believe it or not, many of the big craft that are out there that are humans' crafts do look like aircraft carriers or things that would go through water. Normally, you think of Navy, because he said, from what they understanding, going through space is similar to going through the water. And so there is a reason why some of the things actually look more like you would think the U.S. Navy, and why the U.S. Navy is so involved. He also brought up something that I thought was interesting that I had not heard of before. And again, I'm just repeating it, have no idea. I just thought it was interesting. He made a point, again, to say this has obviously been going on for a while. And he made a point to say that, believe it or not, there's already been a space battle, let's say, between the United States and Russia. So there's already been incidents in space, actual fighting that has occurred. He didn't go into much detail, but I thought it was very, very interesting, the conversation that he was having. Then again, as we were talking about some of the dynamics that are going on now around the world, the racism and whatever, he brought up something that was very interesting. He said he was actually into some of this esoteric stuff and would go to meetings. And he said 40 years ago, he went to a meeting that he's never been able to forget. And he said he was at a particular meeting. He said, in general, again, you had all these people dressed like hippies, all of this stuff going on. And they're waiting for the speaker. And, they're all spouting their, let's say, hippie agendas or other types of agendas or whatever in what they were wearing, which actually made them stand apart from a normal person walking the street, that you knew they maybe had different ideas just because they dressed in a way that would be suggestive of them. So he said the gentleman that came out was in a three-piece suit and, tucked to the hills, and the audience are like rolling their eyes like, well, who's this clown, and this, that, and the other. And he said, and he started, touting off, well, I bet you people think this. And, and everyone's just kind of ignoring him because they don't want to engage, because he looks so a part of, conservatism, let's say, anti whatever. And so they would never want to engage with him. And then basically he revealed himself and he said, I'm as Marxist as any of you out here. And then the meeting changed into the dynamics of you will never be able to make changes the way you currently are. It's not going to happen. You are too threatening, you're too different, you're too whatever. He said, you're going to have to get yourself together, put yourself in a three-piece suit. You're going to have to get yourself in positions that, that are doctors, that are lawyers, that are this, that are that. You're going to have to do that. And then the infiltration can begin. So he said, this happened 40 years ago, and this wasn't a fly-by-night group. This was the plan being implemented to start the infiltration, let's say. And he was dead serious. He said, this is, because I said, well, I thought at least it was going on for 20 years. And he just looked at me, he says, no, over 40. People have been getting themselves together with their ideology, but looking normal to get themselves into certain positions. Um, and I thought, well, this is, wow. I mean, I knew it had been going on, but I didn't. And he said, I'm telling you, I was there. And I thought it was such an interesting conversation because now one of the things, again, now I, I do not believe Trump is a saint. I believe he's the other half of the same coin. But I will admit, I do believe that President Trump had moments where he was a little aghast himself at people he thought were on, let's say, his ideology that turned on him. So they were everywhere. They were in the Justice Department and the FBI and the CIA and all these areas where he thought that he actually had more of a cohesion to make whatever splash his cabal line wanted to make. And he was even taken aback. I do believe that actually happened. And I think it goes in line with this conversation. Now, I must admit, the person who was sitting there next to me hearing all this was just couldn't even believe this conversation was happening. Um, uh, Really just one of those moments that is this really happening in front of me? So it was really, really an interesting conversation about the concept of, again, putting a plan together to implement over time versus the way that most citizens they've gotten to become, which is more of instant pudding. And so these ideologies, again, we just can't stress enough. You have to get it. They are put together way over time. And there's plan A, plan B, all the way to, double Z and 13 double Z. I mean, that they have means to maneuver and correct and do whatever, because again, this is not short term. This is long term thought out process. I do believe, in all honesty, there is and you and I haven't spoken about this, and I don't want us to deviate, but I just want to throw it out there. I certainly do not believe it's a coincidence now that some of these things are happening and the 100-year disclosure agreement. I'm sure that at the time that there was, again, the evolution occurring of how will we evolve ourselves to still maintain control, even though we've made an agreement that there will be some type of disclosures that begin to come out. So there's no coincidence in any of this. And I really appreciated that gentleman, saying these things so openly. So I decided to, again, covering a broad stroke instead of focusing on one thing. I wanted to, have conversation to see what was he willing to talk about and what was he not willing to talk about. So he certainly was willing to acknowledge that that our humanity is well out in space doing things. What I found interesting, and he was not opposed to hearing that, the esoteric groups during in Germany and everything may have played a part, in moving some of this advanced technology, even though there kind of was an agreement. It was going on well even before that. So he was not, but then an uncomfortableness started to come about. And the uncomfortableness came about when the thought of aliens, okay? So it was when any talk of if they were working with somebody. Now he jokingly said, oh yeah, them or the grays or the reptoids or whatever. He goes, but the real aliens are in your gut. And change would change the subject meaning. And I kind of agree with this, a kind of the concept of the change in the foods that have happened and how that is causing, and what he referred to as the aliens in our gut were bad bacteria that were now changing us fundamentally to want lower vibrational food, let's say, food that would keep you weak, keep you sluggish, keep you not at your tip, even mentally or whatever. And how, again, that is so prevalent now within the society. So in his mind, he's talking those aliens, right? Although he acknowledged it. So I did mention, because we were talking about, the infrastructure needed for us to be out there with our big old aircraft carriers, and briefly tried to touch on the subject of advanced technology, advanced medicine, advanced ways of having a needed workforce to put together the infrastructure. And again, there was uncomfortableness in his conversation at that point. But I did again bring Chris up because I said Chris deals with a lot of people. It seems that there seems to be a breakdown of the ability in some people to have them not start to remember certain things. It's bleeding over into this current present moment. It's causing problems in their life. And one of the things that Chris, has been working with is people like that to try and help them during all of this. And, he listened, and it was kind of interesting because I think other people came in. The conversation needed to just kind of end and trail off. About 15, 20 minutes later, there was another moment that he and I were just alone. And he actually, believe it or not, handed me his name and number and thought it would be interesting to speak to Chris. Now, his reasonings for speaking to Chris is that he kind of himself was on a bit of a shamanic journey, and he had gone through some sweat lodges and gone through some different things and seeing what he thought was other members of his circle, or other versions of himself. And he was kind of explaining how your circle becomes smaller and smaller as you deal with certain things. And so I think it was another way of expressing kind of having to deal with some inner stuff in order to stop outside interference. And in my mind, because he was bringing up himself, that, it could have been ties to other lifetimes or things like that, but done in a more a sweat lodge type of conversation that they had. And he thought maybe it would be interesting to speak to Chris about that. I thought, well, that's interesting, but we still continued a little bit more on the, let's say, conversation of secret space program and, or let's say, potential alien involvement, that when we were alone by ourselves, he spoke a little bit more, and he did not disagree in the concept of a workforce being taken and people being brought back and memories being wiped. He did not poo-poo it and or necessarily try to change the subject. However, what he did do is he, said, I just need to tell you something. I did not feel threatened by him at all. I did not feel anything bad. I thought it was genuine. And he said, I need to tell you, you need to be careful what you say and who you say it to. You need to be careful. And I first all I was like, oh my God, my first warning. I was like, kind of like, I didn't act that way, but inside I was like, I feel you're just confirming everything that I believe.
Yeah, so that made me suspicious of the entire incident.
Right. And so he did that. Again, we were just in private, but he did give his name and number. And I would be, it's not like I'm not suspicious, but, I'll be quite honest. I was curious. I wanted to know. So, and I thought that was very, very interesting. The reason I wasn't threatened is because there's not a single thing that I've just said that we were talking about that we haven't already talked about. Okay. Yeah. We've talked about this for years now. So what I actually almost felt like, and I told Chris, I said, I don't know. I'm not pretending to know. I didn't feel really threatened, but I did feel his concern was real. but all of a sudden in my mind, when that occurred, I had a bit of a flashback. And the flashback happened to go to Missouri when we were there. And there was an 85-year-old man who was in the audience. And he was listening to her talk. It just so happens during that lecture, Chris could not channel. The energies were too bad. And so he had to stand up and say, I'm sorry, I can't channel. We'll continue our conversation, but I cannot open up in this. This is a very dense area, blah, blah, blah. And people were fine. And we continued into conversation. So what happened at the end is the gentleman wanted to speak to Chris. And he basically said, Chris, I would have thought you were a fraud, complete and utter fraud, until you said you couldn't channel. Because you're right, you can't channel appropriately in this particular environment. And then you were speaking of things that I have experienced and that I know about. But in the time frame that I was your age, in the 50s, we would have been killed for it. So he said, my guides, I wasn't going to come to this, and my guide would not let me go until I went, because the guide wanted to show me that it's a different time and that this is now being spoke about. And so this gentleman who was doing some pretty neat things in the community. The guide was doing it to help let him know that if he wanted to open more up in conversation about his life, about some of his experiences or whatever, that he should not be afraid to do so anymore. And that was the whole purpose. So that flash went through my head, and I said, so I know that there are plenty of people that maybe have had exposures to things, and there were serious repercussions, more serious before. They can't control it as much now. And so, so I don't know. I know, it sounds like he communicates with friends or whatever, and they may still be at a limit, based upon whatever their exposure was and whatever they felt was safe. So that's what I felt more about it, because again, there was one piece of information that hadn't been talked about, that we haven't openly talked about.
Yeah, that we haven't openly talked about, but from the era in which both those gentlemen came from, it was life or death with this information. And what we talk about now, that shows that it's been more opened up, and that goes along the lines with the 100 years disclosure, where that in the I believe the 2040s, if you want to go with Truman instead of Eisenhower, would be in conjunction with the 100-year disclosure. If you want to go with Truman, but if you want to go with Eisenhower, it would be the 2050s. But if you want to go that route. And also what I find very, very interesting about that specifically is there has been this major usage, and I said this in some of the Fallout shows that Ryan and I have done as well, usage of the 50s look of things. I mean, all over, even in the new Loki TV show, which is about Time Core, by the way, guys, if you want to check that out. Very accurate as far as I'm concerned. They went with this 50s look. Fallout, they do the same thing. Ryan and I both said that post-World War II is when the timelines diverged in the storyline. That is dead on accurate, where there is this constant usage of the 50s look in a lot of stuff, and it's a resurgence. This is all coming back right now. This is not only do I believe that's where some things are rewinding back to temporally, but then the stage before that where there was a timeline schism. But the last one that happened was the post-World War II.
And that would have been in line probably in the time where there was a lot of an attempt by certain groups, we could say either just technologically, corporations and or others with agendas, that they were learning in perfecting more of a time travel thing, and they were working on trying to manipulate And, from what we understand, who knows, with the Mandela effect, there were time manipulations. Now, as we've said before, there were certainly what we would call critical, untouchable events, that it doesn't matter how much you try to manipulate it, it stands. And, there apparently are reasons behind it, that, what's the group that manages that?
What?
The mending of the time frame. They're all gray. I forgot their name.
Oh.
You call them the Guardians, the one between the.
Oh yeah, they're like a guardianship. Yeah,
the guardianship.
The void space.
The void space folks. They're the ones that I believe came in and spoke about it and said, because there are moments that are so critical that you would never be able to change the outcome. It would maybe cause a resurgence of something to happen again. It would end up the same way. So there are certain pieces of historical events that seem to be completely locked and no manipulation. But then again, as we've said before, this kind of got out of control. And I can't remember if it was in the 70s or the 80s, kind of a lockdown on it started to really happen.
Yeah.
Where some of this time manipulation was tampered down some.
Yeah, I know the Montauk Project was late 70s and 80s, and then someone out there cracked down on it, and it started to come back after a while, more towards into the 90s. There were a lot of portals that were open, a lot of archonic type invasions that took place in the 90s. And this will probably not surprise people. The New Age movement came around in the 90s, also as a result of some people always like to use CIA a lot. It was created by the CIA, like conspiracy theorist was. But that was a way to steer people, basically divide them from themselves from within, like always stay in, say, love and light and not acknowledge other emotions within themselves, therefore dividing them within themselves. Not that I'm saying love and light is a bad thing.
No, we're just saying balanced.
Balanced
is what you want.
And this is a lot of the things that built out from that time, that time schism coming back is where you saw a lot of these divides within the self. Well, there was somebody out there really cracked down on some of these time manipulations. It's just like, again, it goes back to the show Loki. We've been watching this. We saw one episode of this where we saw that anything that basically deviates from what they call a sacred timeline tends to get cracked down on and then wiped out or erased. And it gets put back to what they know of as history. Since in the Marvel cinematic universe, it's parallel timelines and not just linear. They don't want a bunch of alternate timeline schisms out there, because they started to quote. I noticed they quoted ancient galactic history when they were talking about the old time war and stuff like that. When the Orions broke through, they made loose reference to it in that show.
And again, one of the things to remember, because I was a little saddened actually by watching it, because I told Chris, I said, "Wow, they're required to inform. It's a requirement. We know that that's done a lot in sci-fi." And here we've been talking about this for a while, and now poof, we see it, now showing out on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're making fun of it at the exact same time.
Yeah, they made fun of Time Core at the same time made it serious.
So again, why would someone do that? Because they're telling you the truth, but they want you to not believe in any of this as truth. And so, it's the manner in which they have provided certain required disclosure bits, because it sets already people up to be made fun of if they believe it. And so, I think it's interesting that it's certainly acknowledged, but it always saddens me when I see things start to show up that we've been talking about, because, a lot of people are just going to think that you got a mental disorder, and that, you know what I mean? It's the way that they do it. This is nothing new.
Yeah, they put it out per the whole parameters behind the 100-year disclosure. They put it out in in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for instance, and they were pretty damn accurate with it too, which I do applaud whoever put that in there. But these are things we've been talking about. Then all of a sudden we see it over here. Then somebody else could say, "Hey, you got this from this," but yet if they looked at our track record, we've been talking about it for at least 5 years now. So
that,
yeah.
and again, setting people up to be being made fun of. So there's
Yeah.
no, the reason I bring that up is that, these are people that think about things over a long span of time, to change their psyche, long span of time to do these things. So in a sense, it's going to be, again, it's going to end up being about spiritual growth in a person that occurs, that they come with the truth from within themselves, and stop, all of this other things that they want to make it easier. So I'm going to just put all my faith into that. And I'm going to ignore my own spiritualness and my own feelings. So it just, again, just goes to show how, complicated, and I know I use that word a lot because I don't know what other word to use, how complicated it is for people in general. And again, whether or not you feel it or not, there is amazement to feeling that we're moving at a pace that is actually kind of amazing for as much that's been put on us to keep us from. So, so in a sense, there's enough people that are lending the thought process that this is how they're disclosing, that more and more people are open to this could be more factual. And so in one sense, for one group of people, it provides more information to internally ponder. However, for some people that aren't there, it just gives them more ammunition to make fun of somebody else. So it's going to be this, kind of internal thing. So we're going to, again, so this happened several weeks ago. And then I was potentially legitimately exposed to someone who thought maybe they just had because they, maybe have some breathing issues of their own, some sinus issues of their own. And I potentially was exposed and started to become ill from an exposure where they didn't realize that maybe they had something that was communicable. And I think, again, in the environment that I'm in right now, in this environment with people's allergies and people's things that are just so rampant with the grasses and things that are here, it is certainly easy to have a little virus that's tagging along that people are not intentionally spreading. Okay. So I think it's important to say, because I think COVID has just completely screwed everybody up, but people have non-infectious sinus issues from allergies where they're, maybe showing up at work or going to the store. There is no fever. There is no whatever. This looks like and is acting like exactly what I have every season, but there could be something tagging along. So again, I'm not angry about anything because that's just how some of this works. But people have to get back to the understanding that these little communicable type events happen and people are not wishing someone else to die from it or to get ill, or there's a malevolence behind it. I just need to put that out there because this is a part of life. We get exposed to these things and then our body has a chance to fight them. We gain better immunity. It's normal. So there is nothing like that going on. However, I will say that what I ended up becoming exposed to seemed to be lasting longer and getting a little bit more serious than other people. And an interesting thing occurred we're going to now start talking about something else in our ponderings. But I'm going to use it in the context because, again, I'm just trying to give you a linear idea of things that have occurred over the past few weeks. So my particular illness, was making me completely lose my voice, coughing beyond belief, this, that, and the other. Again, you could think it's sinusitis. It's a little bit more. Chris as well, yeah, after about being around me maybe 4 days, himself starting to get a scratchy throat, things like that. No big deal. What happened is that Chris, you did I don't know if it was a show or a reading that you did with somebody, and it just so happens that um, folks came in that hadn't shown up for a while, and that was forest people that were from a different state that showed up for your conversation.
Yeah.
And again, they have not been around. This was like a surprise. Wow, you guys are showing up. And then some local ones as well. When his time was done, they stayed. And you may want to talk about that.
What happened was, and I believe, again, this goes along with certain disclosures as well. I'll get to that point in a moment. What what happened was, what I have been seeing, I saw this in a session, then we saw it within ourselves. I've been seeing within people these almost like zombified versions of themselves, but it's almost like an embryonic zombie, if you want to kind of get technical. Then it starts to grow into a version of themselves that looks like themselves but dead. And to me, that I saw that as a form of possession. Well, my brain was interpreting this as like a form of zombie. Well, what happened during the session, I started to discover this in people. I started to remove it and do what I usually do. Well, after I came out. And
you came into the bedroom because I was napping.
Yeah, because me and the client were talking about what the true zombie apocalypse truly was. The awaken, unawaken, or the accosting of some groups on another group. And it was like people that were unawakened, constantly fighting and staying in that state. That's what we were discussing at that time. What the true meaning of the Walking Dead was. That's what we were kind of discussing. Well, what happened was we came into the bedroom. And, the forest people were still around, and they were genuinely, disturbed by something. Well, within Joanna, there was one of these like zombie versions of herself that was kind of coalescing.
So before you saw that, though, what I thought was interesting, and I just want to bring this up because sometimes Chris will just get to the point, but I find this an interesting detail. Do you remember what you were saying is they kind of circled around me, and then they were sending kind of this, you were like, it was like a beating drum. They
were doing a drumming,
a drumming, and it was very interesting. So at that moment, you didn't see anything or whatever. Yeah. They had actually tuned into something, but it was, I think, an interesting thing. It's like somebody just didn't reach and rip something out. They actually did a very spiritual drumming that I guess allowed this to become more coalesced or visible or something.
What happened is their drumming and their chanting they were doing, because they were doing this guttural sound as well. The sound waves were allowing, and the sound light waves were allowing this, whatever it is, to coalesce. And it looked more like how she does now, but as just a deadened version of herself, but only like a, say, a full-grown head, but with the rest of like this stringy like bodily like form, kind of like if a fetus had like a full-grown head, which was kind of creepy. But it was dead, like you'd see something you'd see off of a zombie movie or Walking Dead or something like that. So this was pulled out, and then they said I had one, and they pulled one out of me. And then what they started talking about was this was the other half of what the live vaccines are. Say you have something that's placed like this inside of somebody, and the vaccines, or the bad ones, I should say, activate this and turn it into the full person. Therefore, their real consciousness, as you like to say, Joanna, goes more into their big toe, and this deadened version is what takes over. And this is what dawned on me, what people have been seeing in dream sequences and stuff for years. People kept insisting, oh, there's going to be a zombie apocalypse. I just know it. And they kept saying it with such power. Like I know something's wrong here. And I've talked to many people. They're like, no, I keep seeing this in dreams over the years. And I'd had the same thing happen. I'll get to that in a moment. But the real zombie apocalypse would be this, not necessarily the actual Walking Dead like you'd see in the show, but it still is viral based, and it's still etherically viral based, along with the combination of this vaccine. Like in the show, somebody walks around with a virus in them, the zombie bites them, they turn into this, or if they die, they automatically shift into this zombie form. This is what's happening in the show. That was more symbolic. What happened in the dream sequences I've had over the years was, it was really creepy and surreal, where I would just see normal people walking around. All of a sudden, these zombified people come over and just attack them and just accost them. And ironically enough, in some of the dream sequences, some of them were wearing masks, not like surgical masks, but like hockey masks, or like some were surgical masks, other ones were like upper face eye masks and stuff like that. Like basically parts of themselves that were hidden from themselves, unawakened mindsets. Well, what was going on with that is I was seeing this for years, that it would just come out of nowhere and be right in the public eye. What I was actually being shown was a disclosure of the years to come, what somebody was trying to establish as a part of some form of disclosure that they were trying to forge now. And the zombified people would be more of the unawake type of people. Not to label anybody, but that's what was being shown. Also, what somebody was attempting to do is to get us on this side of it to label those that were like that, and to co-create another half to this equation. Also, normally if somebody sees a zombified form in a dream sequence, it sometimes is an undealt with virus in the DNA or some ancestral curse or something like that. That's another thing that was being presented as well, people that had not dealt with all these things by the time these energies were coming about. What was being shown was modern times. What was being shown was now. And what was also being shown as I haven't recapped on the show Walking Dead in quite some time, so I can't quote all the disclosure that's in it because I haven't seen the whole thing. But there were some very interesting bits of disclosure that had to do with timelines that didn't happen too. Like 2012, for instance. Previously to 2012, there was an episode of The Walking Dead called Nebraska. And there was a line at the very end of the show, which was the main character, Rick, was talking to one of the bad guys. And he used the line, "I hear Nebraska is nice this time of year," meaning it was more of an implied, sarcastically implied safe zone, meaning what was actually going to take place later on was some kind of solar ejection that was going to take place and wipe out Earth population. That did not happen. Somebody prevented this. But that's what the whole 2012 thing was about, in part, and also conversions of energies and timelines again. What they were trying to say with that is that Nebraska was some kind of safe zone. Later on, this was able to be used for the COVID thing as well. So they turned it around and used it as a disclosure as the COVID thing as well, and with the vaccine thing. So it can be a double disclosure there.
Yeah. So I want to bring this back to the original conversation with the gentleman that came in, because again, not attached to one iota piece of information, just his own, saying topics regarding nanites and regarding us breathing them in all of the time.
Yeah, and the vaccine.
So wait one second. And we're breathing them in. Chris and I began, because one of the conversations that we had always had was, and you were always perplexed about why are these vaccines even existing? Why is it that they just don't put it out there and we're all zombified? And I thought it was very interesting. And so we've been pondering that. Now, as far as what we believe now is a dual process of something being set up potentially, and then an activation, let's say through the vaccine process, it seems as a plausible thought process now.
Yeah.
And again, that gentleman coming in to reiterate that I thought was interesting, that one point. But one thing when we ponder this right now, a couple things go through our minds about this 1-2 punch. And one of them is consent. Okay. There is a big deal about giving consent. Now, it could be out of trickery, it could be out of whatever, but the idea of consent being needed to potentially then, and it's an interesting thing. The dynamic, I don't know. I don't know if this is about part of the agreement with the technology that in order to use anything based off of what they learned from somebody else, that they had to disclose and they had to get consent, that they could not treat humanity as a sheeple. So they've done it in all kind of tricky
They have to mention it
ways.
to make it work. Yeah.
They have to mention it and get consent. So, but are they going to tell you the full story? No, not necessarily. Are they going to potentially, take over your soul? No, because it seems to me another plausible thing is all they're going to do really is it reminds me a little bit of the concept that we say when we, oh, I'm sorry, no, my mind's slipping. Um, the disruptor, the person that has something put in them prior to birth to come in and ruin
Oh,
it.
inborn.
Inborn, excuse me, I'm sorry. So, we'd always talked about, wow, can you imagine deciding that you wanted an experience of an inborn where your soul is actually in that body too, stuffed into the little toe, while this overarching demonic type of thing is really, you're experiencing it all right, but you're not as much in control of what you're doing because something else has really got the driver's wheel, but you're in there, you wanted the experience, and by God, you're getting it. That in a sense, that more of something like that could be occurring where you have a soul now that's kind of numbed, let's say. I would imagine a numbing occurs and kind of resigned to just give in. Okay, so it's an interesting dynamic. I must tell you, when you think about this, think about a population where people are beginning to change like this. And now think about everything in society that becomes a distraction to it. The border crisis, we're worried about, all of these people that are now going to start voting Democratic and going to allow more of this to occur. Well, it's really not needed, man, if you can change half the population over, you know what I mean, to being more compliant, you'll always vote these clowns in. So you got this other thing over here. So you're really not paying attention to the potentials of what's really going on in this other area. Another thing that I want to bring up about, again, a very hard conversation, how people really want one side of the Democratic or Republican coin to be the savior. And we keep saying it's not going to be, they're both puppets. Now, they may not be completely aware themselves of how much of a puppet they are.
Yeah.
And again, there is compartmentalization. Does it mean that all these lower level cabals know everything? I don't believe at all. I believe they have their lane. They're very narrow focus. And, you have to go to the hierarchy to put the big puzzle together. So there's no doubt in my mind. But I do want to bring something up again, because I think, again, when you look at the political scene and you look at now the controversy of, the actual conversation that people are talking about now, that this was created in a lab. For me, that's a dumb moment, because it was, for some of us, this was, been going on for a very long time. The creation of different things, creating diseases, getting the antidote, this, that, and the other. It's been there a long time. Emergency use authorization. So I kept bringing that up. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to always say is there could not be a treatment for the emergency use authorization to be utilized. So now we're finding out that hydroxychloroquine worked. Okay. We're finding out that other cheap meds, ivermectin, worked. And again, it's despicable to think of the loss of life that was allowed because of the powers that be that would not allow a treatment to come through, because it would not then allow the vaccines to go out. And so again, the story of the vaccines, why is it being so heavily pushed? Why are they now doing things, with adolescents who are not even really at risk of having disease? What's the real story going on? And the conversation I find about emergency use, if you do watch the political arena, it's not coming up. I'm pointing that out to you because both sides are complicit. Okay. Both sides, are just full bore about the vaccines. There's another piece to this, and neither side is really touting the facts behind emergency use and authorization, and the facts that if there was a treatment, then you would have stopped this vaccine from being rolled out because the treatment would have been used instead. So to me, I want to just point that out a little bit, because it is hard to want to accept the puppets are all playing both sides, but they are, and they're interlocked, okay, interlocked with the concept now of the vaccines.
Yeah, and granted, are there white hats working out there? Yes, there are, but you're not seeing them. None of whom you have seen are white hats. This is just something I want to reiterate. None of whom you've seen are the white hats. The real white hats are not out in the open at all. They are not seen. They do not have a public name. They do not have a public face. There are bad guys, of course, that are the same way, do not have a public name, do not have a public face. There are wars that go on in the background, battles that you've never heard of, probably never will for some time. This is what's going on. You're just seeing the puppet theater, is what you're seeing. That's all you've ever seen is the puppet theater, but you're seeing elements of the crap that goes on in the background on the forefront, like with the vaccines. This is a point I want to bring up with the vaccines. They always say, well, there's black goo and nanites in the vaccines. Yeah, that may be true of some of them, but there's not enough of this stuff in that form to go around to every single man, woman, and child. That's not feasible on their part. Yes, there are nanites in the air. There's different types of nanites, holographic, physical, dust-like particle ones. And also you have the black goo, of course, and smoke-like ones. But when it comes to the vaccines, why, would they need to make it for everybody when they can just tell everybody that huge horror story and get everybody else to co-create it and turn all of it into that, you see, because these nanites respond to commands. They respond to that authority. So with that said, if people co-created, they've just now co-created and manufactured what these people are trying to manufacture, and they don't have to use any resources to do it.
And you have to remember, we're not bringing this up because we're gloom and doom. We're bringing this up now because just like with other disease processes, just getting a common cold or something that we're exposed to, there's something referred to as the chain of infection. And so in this, I think we should imply the same principles of a chain of infection, although the chain looks a little bit different. One of them may be the precursor of having this I don't even know we want to name it, but we're calling it a pre event, meaning something's activating in you to bring in, or the nanites are starting to create, or something's going on to bring in this event that's hanging out inside of you that looks like an old decrepit person.
Yeah, it looks like, and this pre-event is like how in The Walking Dead, where the character of Rick tells everybody that everybody has the virus, and even a member of the CDC tells them this previously in the show, where everybody has the virus. It's just that another component has to be added to activate it, and I believe it's still an analogy for this that's going on.
And so, and then you have the vaccine component, then you have something again referred to as consent to allow this process, to begin. So in again, any communicable diseases, any diseases like that, you break one piece of the chain of infection, it cannot occur. Okay, so what's important, I think, about what is starting to come out, what people are starting to see, should not be leading people to this horror story of, oh my God, it's inevitable because they're going to force. Well, you know what? I'm going to be quite honest. I could be backed up in the corner and I end up taking a vaccine. It's not going to be out of consent. It's going to be under complete and utter duress, and I don't agree. So they're not getting my consent. Even if they inject this, my spiritual is no, this is an assault going on. This is like, being raped in a sense. You're forcing me to do this because you are going to deny me food, clothing, and shelter if I don't do it. That is not consent under anybody's
That's coercion,
thought of what consent means. So you need to understand that. So again, I think for those of you who are in the field of being able to start to see things within other people, and you may be starting to see things that you can remove, this is now giving you something to potentially look for that is new, that you may have seen maybe these things over the past year, and you may think, boy, it's always been there. I've never seen it before. We're more of this may actually be something new now that is a part of something else.
Yeah, I believe it was part of a plan. Was just implemented.
That's just being implemented. And so feeling free to take that out, you should try and take it out. Again, you shouldn't be going around scanning everybody. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people around you, or this, that, and the other, or if somebody's coming to you because they're not feeling well or whatever, look at it as another implant or something that doesn't belong and needs to be gotten rid of. That breaks the chain of infection. Not consenting breaks the chain of infection. Having a strong enough intention that you so don't give consent that it's like water or saline going into your body, and nothing that is not for your highest good is going to begin, is another way of breaking the chain of infection.
And also you can alter what's in that syringe too with your intentions, because some of them are indeed duds that are out there.
Right.
You can always say, if the push came to shove, I will never take the vaccine no matter what. But in this, if you're backed into a corner, make sure that intention-wise you're getting one that's harmless, and that you see it as harmless, that you see it as not harming you at any level. Now, there's another component to this that I also had a raid with the same person. This was quite a while back, though, where we discovered that this race was several races out there were trying to hijack what people know of as the silver cord, going back and through the neck, kind of like a umbilical cord, to uplink. It was an uplink to create what now I know of as these zombie fetal type of things. This was another component to that, where these races were trying to exchange one consciousness for another and put the original one down into the big toe, is essentially what it was. They couldn't get rid of it completely. They couldn't dump it somewhere else, but they could shove it down somewhere else and slowly transform those codes over to something that was more like them. This is not something you want to happen. So even sometimes merely discovering it changes it. Sometimes by merely looking at it and knowing about it changes the dynamic of it. Even speaking about it changes the dynamic of it. This is a fundamental truth where you look at a subject, the subject changes. I can already feel that something in the future has changed by even talking about this. So know that if you're in a situation by which a vaccine is imminent, and I'm not saying co-create that by any stretch of the imagination, but if it's imminent, make sure that what's in that syringe, you are not consenting to anything that could harm you, not consenting at all in here or in here. Not ideologically either, like you're saving people by doing this. No, that's the worst thing that you can be in. Make sure that you are saying that it's not harmful to you. Do not get into the nobility mindset that they have been beating people over the head for the past year. Like, oh, we're doing this to save the world. No, it has nothing to do with saving the world. Nothing. So at that instance, if you're confronted with this, just see what's in that syringe as nothing that can harm you. Absolutely nothing. I don't care what color it is. Just see it as nothing that can harm you. I've known people to do this, and it absolutely rendered it inert. Also, if you are in a situation by which you can remove that, what I was talking about before, that weird, creepy, zombified like seed, let's just say that was planted in there. If you're able to do that, the other thing has also been rendered harmless because you've just removed half of the component. I found this out. Once this other thing's been removed, it can't be put back. And I've wondered for a while some of the things that I've been seeing in vision sequences about things growing inside of other people and stuff like that. I wasn't seeing anything that was concurrent in that timeline. I was being warned about it. So that something was up and coming. It wasn't like, oh, we missed this all these years. No, it literally was just made. It was just implemented. So with that said, go back to the vaccines for a minute. See it as harmless. See it as completely harmless, and that you're just moving on as you and not a shell of you.
And I think one of the things to point out now is I think now becomes the intention, of people like Chris to now find how to undo it all. So let's say all of the steps occurred and something is now changing within you. I do not believe, and you better not either. I really don't believe it. I mean, I do not believe that it is permanent. I mean, meaning that it can't be undone.
It has a half-life and can wear off too.
So I think, this may be part of the discussions about already knowing they need reoccurring yearly vaccines, which again can be co-created out of existence as people learn more. If you're, having to sign a form with your name, scribble your name and just in your mind saying, I do not consent, this is coercion.
And also,
make sure you're saying this in your head. If you want to say it out loud, then they may not give you the vaccine. But I mean, I'm just saying, scribble your name and as you're writing, you see yourself writing, I do not consent, this is coercion.
And do not also see the yearly vaccine thing as imminent. Some people go into this mindset and say, oh no, we just have to accept this is the way it's happening. And this is where I get upset because it's like, no, stop co-creating that.
Well, again, and I agree, don't co-create it, but I do believe for those in the true know, let's say those in the true know, I'm not saying those at lower level implementing, that this whole concept of it needing boosters to maintain itself, let's say, always then will give a person an opportunity to know better and to not allow it. But I do believe I do have faith that there is going to be a way to reverse it. I really do. I think, again, knowledge is power. I do believe that our co-creativeness, we can do virtually anything we put our minds to. And so I do feel that, part of what we're all going through right now, again, is to understand the true dynamics of what have been going on around us, understand how entrenched it is, understand the mind processing of those, that are seeing this planet as a true farming planet, that you really aren't worth anything except whatever their needs dictate, that the truth of this is really hard, and that minions have been put into place all over, and this has been being done for quite some time, to implement what is going on right now. And so it's an interesting thing because, again, we ponder a lot of stuff, then we put out what we believe are theories, which I would think, again, there's a lot of information coming forward at this being a potential theory, something to really look at and ponder, and to then start to co-create it by saying no, and no, this is not what humanity wants. Again, talk to other souls on a soul level. So pretend you're having conversation with others around you. You may not be speaking it this way, but you're having it. Spread the information that way. You don't think it works spreading information that way, but it does. So you have many ways to be able to put information out there that in general the population consensus would say no to if they really knew the inner workings of some of this stuff. So don't feel you're unempowered. That's the key right now, is don't feel that way at all. And so I don't really have much more to say. I don't know if you do, but I know we've said a lot. It's been, so for us, it really has been an interesting past few couple weeks, even though within it we've not been well. And and again, potentially with uh, when the forest people showed up and were doing it, they were very angry, because I believe, honestly, potentially there wasn't opportunity then to insert this other, and someone came to opportunistically make sure this stuff was starting to form. But again, for us, it was then about learning about it so that we could really try to tease some of this out, so that we could actually share a theory with you. So, and that's what we try to do, to try and, again, to provide information. Knowledge is power, and other things for you guys to think about as well. And then do not think by any stretch of anyone's imagination that you are helpless to this.
Yes. Also, to recap it, we started talking about the 100-year disclosure. Even dreams and shows apply to this regarding this subject. Started with I'll just say the Valiant Thor timeline when he came in 51. I believe that's where this began, this 100-year disclosure, when he came in, and they ended up unfortunately taking the bad guy side in that. But that was always supposed to happen in that particular retrospect. Valiant Thor would always say that particular event had to take place the way that it did, to be able to push an agenda ahead, or a positive one ahead, 100 years instead of having it take longer. That's how he would justify it. Anyway, going along, timeline shift. That's why you're seeing the 50s things along with time travel.
Or disclosure. I think that's
disclosure,
partly disclosure, to try and make people understand that the 50s, even though it appeared on the outside to be a calm, loving time,
Yeah,
it's when a lot of shit
a lot
went down.
of shit was going
A
down.
lot
A lot
of
of
shit went
tumultuous
down during the
shit going
50s
down.
behind
Yeah.
the scenes.
A lot of it was going on behind the scenes. You also had a timeline inversion in that time frame. I believe it was the Cuban Missile Crisis that took.
That was in the early 60s.
That was another time inversion I found out took place.
Yeah.
Was later on at the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a nuclear disaster that was going to take place there too. There was another interfold that took place, and some people came in from another timeline and fixed it there, because that was going to be a nuclear conflict where the Orions then were going to be able to walk out in the open. They actually depicted this in a show many years ago called Sequest, where they time traveled back to the Cuban Missile Crisis and saw a nuclear war had taken place. They came back, went back a couple of years before that, and fixed it. But point being is that was a slightly soft disclosure of that repair to the timeline that had taken place at that time. Now, fast forward again to some of the dreams that people were having about the zombie apocalypse, or people interpreting what the zombie apocalypse actually was. That's part of disclosure of what was going to happen later as of right now, and also all of the inner work that people had to do to get rid of all those viruses in the DNA, including things that did not belong, things that were not them, not consenting or allowing themselves to be shoved into their big toe, things of that nature. That's what was being depicted there. Now, in concurrent times, like I said, do not co-create any more of this junk that they want to keep projecting forward. Do not allow them to form a timeline that you do not want. Even though I keep seeing also recently in people's sessions where some people are still within their 20 and backs to where it ends somewhere in a couple of years. And some of these beings out there don't want people remembering stuff that hasn't happened yet. Why would they not want that? Because they don't want some junk that some people might remember to become unraveled and be rewritten. So that is the one conclusion I can come up with, that they don't want somebody to co-create it differently to where it changes something that they want to keep in play. This is what we're faced with right now, co-creating and manifesting differently, and making sure that you're always being due diligent about getting rid of what doesn't serve and being creative and being in your passion. That's essentially what it boils down to at the moment. So anything else, Joanna?
No, I hope you guys found this talk interesting. You know, it was a lot of information that we think is really worth thinking about.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for watching this broadcast of ours, a talk with me and Joanna. Thank you for subscribing to this Patreon and viewing this video, or wherever it will happen to end up in subscription form. So thank you everybody. Bye bye.